Tommy, I need to go.
Maggie!
Relax and enjoy yourself, John. You just got away with murder.
Hi, this is Lori from Real Cinema Therapy. Well, today I'm going to discuss Coldwater, Episode 2. This is the new series starring Andrew Lincoln. It is currently playing in the UK, but I did hear it will be coming to the US, I believe, in January of 2026. I think it will be on Paramount or Showtime. I forget which one it is, but it definitely will be airing here in January. But since it's not here now, we can talk about it. I've seen all the episodes. There are 6 episodes, and I'm going to break it down for you. This episode was really interesting. We got to see more of a dynamic between John and Tommy, and John is in quite a quandary because John realizes he's getting in over his head with Tommy. It reminds me a little bit of Rick and Shane's dynamic. I had talked about that last time, and I'm going to point it out as we go along. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure you subscribe so you will get notifications when the new episodes drop. I thought it was great. I enjoyed it. And I will be coming out with the next episode soon. I apologize that it took quite a while to get this one out, but the next one I should get out within like the next 4 or 5 days. Let's get into it. We left off last episode with John having a fight with Angus in the park. Tommy finds him alive and Tommy ends up killing him. This was very shocking. Why would Tommy do that? Why would he kill this guy? The guy lived in a trailer. Tommy brought him inside. He was wearing a crucifix on a chain around his neck. He took it off, and then he set the trailer on fire, and Angus burned up. That's how the last episode ended. We're getting a sense that Tommy is a killer, and he saves trophies from his victims. And you see there's other things in this box. So we're starting to realize that Tommy may actually be a serial killer. So the episode starts with him going to his shed, and we see his son, Cameron, is watching him from the upstairs window. But Tommy doesn't see that. Tommy goes in, he opens the box, and he's looking at the crucifix. It's like a rush. It brings a rush to him. It's like he's remembering what it was like killing Angus. I guess he relives it through the trinkets, because you could see he's closing his eyes and he's touching it and he's liking it. Then Rebecca calls him and says, Tommy, it's time to leave. We have to go to church. Tommy panics and he puts the box back, but he drops the crucifix on the floor and runs out. So the next scene, we see his son Cameron is very suspicious. He decides that he's going to check it out. He actually goes to the shed and he's able to open it, and he finds the crucifix on the floor. He picks it up and he takes it away. He figures something's going on here. John cannot sleep. John is laying in bed. He is so stressed out about what happened with Angus. John believes he killed him because he bashed him in the head, in the face with a rock. So he thought he must be dead. He hadn't spoken to Tommy, so he doesn't know for sure what actually happened. He goes on a run to relieve some of his stress. Of course, it's not helping him because he's very stressed out. He goes to Tommy's house and he rings the bell. Cameron opens the door. John says, "Oh, hey, is your dad home?" And Cameron says, "No, he's at church." "You know, I saw you last night. How was your run?" John got a really bad feeling. What is Cameron implying? He decides he wants to go to church because that's where Tommy is. He wants answers. He wants to know what happened, but he can't tell his wife. So he makes up a story that he wants to go to church, and she's surprised by it. She says, "We never go to church. Why do you want to go to church?" He says, "I just do." So they end up going to church. He tries to speak to Tommy, and Tommy says, "We're starting the service now." They're sitting down. A whole Bible group is there. They're all singing Amazing Grace. John and his wife are also singing along. But then John has these flashbacks of Angus. He's having intrusive thoughts of Angus lying there dead. John is suffering from trauma. He can't get this image out of his mind. There's a parishioner kneeling with Tommy, so he figures that's what he's going to do. He goes over to Tommy. Tommy says, "Oh, what do you want to pray for?" John starts asking him, "What happened to Angus? Tell me what happened. Was he dead?" And Tommy said, "Yeah, he was dead. I brought him to his trailer, and I just lit the whole thing on fire, so don't worry about it. I took care of it for you." John walks out of the church, and Tommy follows him. John said, "I think I should report this to the police." And Tommy says, "Don't do that. I understand it's bothering you. Why don't you sleep on it? Give it like 24 hours. See if you feel the same way tomorrow." Rebecca, Tommy's wife, gets a phone call. They found out Angus died. John then fainted. It was too much for him. He couldn't deal with it. And then that night, John is laying in bed and he can't sleep. The next morning, he decides he's going to go to where Angus lived to see what it looks like. And he sees the whole trailer is burnt up. And John had to see it. He's living this 24/7. John is a nice person. He's not a killer. It's hard for him to deal with this. He decides he's going to go to the police and confess because he can't live with this on his conscience. He walks into the police precinct and he says, I have a crime I need to report. Police officer comes out, and this is a friend of Tommy's, and his name is Bobby. Bobby says, hey, John, how are you? What are you doing here? And John says, well, I have a crime I need to confess to. And then John looks, and Tommy comes out of the office because Tommy had followed John. Tommy now is leery that John's going to report it. So sure enough, he's following him. He saw John go to the police station. He asked Bobby if he's done reading the Richard Ramirez book that he loaned him. That was a way to get Bobby away for a moment. Then he turned to John, and Tommy said, what are you doing here? Bobby comes back with the book, and he says, okay, John, what is it that you wanted to tell me? Tommy interrupts Bobby and says, aren't you going hunting now? He says, yeah, I am. Oh, can I come along with you? He said, sure. Then he says, well, let me finish talking to John first. Tommy says, well, John can come with us. Right, John? So the three of them get in the car, and they're going hunting. John is very nervous and he's kind of worried. As they're driving through, we see some of the countryside in Scotland. It is so pretty. It's really beautiful there. Coldwater is a fictitious town. I don't know where they actually filmed this, but the town itself doesn't really exist. They end up in the forest and they get out of the car, and Tommy gives John a gun. And Tommy's really pissed at John at this point because John was going to confess. John says, I don't know how to use a gun. Tommy says, it's easy, I can show you. So he cocks the gun. He said, this is how you do it. And then he says, but you never ever point a gun at a person's face. And then that's exactly what he does. He points the gun right at John's face, and John is terrified. Tommy gives the gun back to John, and he says, listen, just take care. It was like a warning to John that John better behave himself. Then we see John takes off running through the forest. He's really scared now that Tommy may hurt him. So he's running, and then we see Tommy pick up the gun again, and he's pointing it right at John. Now, this scene reminds me of Shane pointing his gun at Rick in the first season of The Walking Dead. When they were in the forest together, they were walking, and Shane got angry with Rick. And when Rick was walking ahead of him, he held up his shotgun, and he was looking at Rick through the scope, and he was thinking of shooting him. The same dynamic. There's a deer right ahead of John, and of course John is so freaked out. He's running, and he hears a shot, and Tommy's trying to kill him, and he sees that Tommy shot this deer. And then he turns around to look at Tommy, and Tommy gives him a very cold stare. You better watch it kind of thing. They go back to the truck carrying the deer. They said that there's a custom that when you have your first kill, you're supposed to put blood on your face. So Tommy took some blood from the deer, and he smeared it all over John's face. John starts wiping his face with a towel, and then you see the blood all over Tommy's hands. He's laughing. He thinks it's funny. He enjoyed it. So then they're alone. Bobby walked away for a minute. Tommy starts saying, I'm really sorry, John. I didn't mean to scare you, but I'm very upset because I felt that you betrayed me. You were going to go to the cops and not discuss this with me first. I panicked, and I'm sorry, but you have to understand how I feel. I did you a favor, John. I helped you. I was being a good neighbor. A good neighbor who covers up a murder, right? He's a good neighbor. He said, and now you're giving me up if you give yourself up. So you need to think about that. Then Bobby comes back. He says, okay, John, I think it's time that we talk. And he asked Tommy to leave them alone for a moment. Tommy says, well, we're all friends here. You could talk in front of me. Bobby says, okay, John, what is it that you wanted to tell me? What was the crime you wanted to confess to? John looks at Tommy, and Tommy says, oh, you want me to tell him? And John said, yeah, okay, you tell him. And Tommy makes up a story that it was a hate crime, that John got into an argument with some woman on social media, and he called her a bitch, and he's afraid this woman's going to report him. He wants to tell the officer, Bobby, himself, before it's reported. This is the story. And you can see the look on Bobby's face. He looks really confused about what's going on here, but he goes, okay, I'm glad you told me, and thanks for letting me know. So they're going back, and they're stopping at a local pub to drop off the deer. And John says, I got to go. I got to pick my kids up from school. Tommy says, no, just come in for a drink. You have to learn to relax. You just got away with murder. I'll buy you a beer. John goes in and he starts drinking with the guys. He's having beer. And then Tommy ordered whiskey for the table and he gave John quite a bit of whiskey. And John gets a little drunk. His therapist said, aren't you supposed to pick up your kids? And then John says, oh, no, I forgot. And he runs out, calls Fiona. She says, I was so worried about you. I couldn't understand why you didn't pick the kids up from school. He says, oh, I'm so sorry. She says, well, I got them. I picked them up. And he says, oh, thank you for picking them up. I'm so sorry. I had no cell range. And he tells her that he's in a pub right now. He gets really angry with him. You're in a pub and you didn't pick up your children and I'm supposed to be at work and you're just drinking. And they start having an argument. John says, all right, I'll come home now. I really can't drive, but maybe I could take a taxi. And she says, no, forget it. If you're drunk, you shouldn't be with the kids. He says, I'm not drunk. I just shouldn't drive. So she says, forget it. Just stay there. He goes back in the bar and he continues drinking. Cameron comes in the bar and he's watching John. And he's very suspicious. He doesn't like John. We see Katrina, which is the lady who works at the food mart. And she also works at the bar here. And she's serving drinks to the table. And Cameron likes her. They have a thing going. Cameron sees John smiling at her because John recognizes her from the food mart. He comes over to John and he says, stop staring at Katrina. You're making her uncomfortable. Tommy says, what are you talking about? He said, back off. Cameron gets really angry and he actually shoves John. John is freaked out. Tommy gets up and tells Cameron, you better leave now. And he does. He walks out, but he's furious. Meantime, John is all shaken up. He's kind of drunk. He wants to go home and he can't. Tommy's kid pushed him and accused him of coming on to Katrina. So John goes in the bathroom and he's putting cold water on his face. Tommy comes in, he's talking to him, and John says, I can't stop thinking about Angus. It's on my mind. I can see him. I can't get it out of my mind. And Tommy says, you're a decent guy, John. You're a good person. Of course it's bothering you. He said, but it's going to get better. You'll see. Do you like dancing? Why don't you dance? So John starts dancing. There's like a band playing Scottish music, and he's dancing, and everyone's having a good time, and he's drinking more and more. And Katrina serves him. Tommy's watching him. Tommy's not drunk at all. He's just watching him. Cameron runs into Nathan. Nathan is the father of Angus. Cameron says, I'm really sorry about what happened to Angus. And he thanked him and he said, I'm here for the funeral because he doesn't live there presently. I think he lives in another town. Cameron said, I have something to tell you. And then the scene changes and we see John is outside the pub with Katrina. And Katrina seems a little interested in him. And they're sharing a joint together. They're talking. And she said, if you need a place to stay tonight, I'm just right up the road. John was intrigued by that. And again, John is really drunk. Now the scene switches and John is again running through the forest. And we see Tommy again pointing his gun at John. But this time, Tommy shoots John. And John touches his stomach and all blood is all over his hands. And then he looks at Tommy and Tommy winks at him. And then he wakes up. John is having a nightmare about Tommy shooting him. So he wakes up and he's in Katrina's apartment. He remembers he and Katrina got it on last night. Now she comes in the room and he asked her, what happened last night? She says, oh, we came back here. We took our clothes off. You kissed me. But that was it. She says, you were too drunk to do anything. John was relieved. He says, you've never been in a situation like this before, and you can't tell my wife I was here. She goes, I'm not going to tell your wife you were here. Why would I do that? She was annoyed with him. She wanted him to leave at that point. He leaves, and Tommy's calling him. And Tommy says, Fiona's here. And John says, oh, well, I don't know where I am. And Tommy says, oh, were you at Katrina's house? And he says, yeah. He goes, oh, you slept with her? He says, no, I didn't. He says, I have to get back, and I don't know what to do. So he goes, don't worry, I'll stall her. So he goes back into the room and Fiona sees a picture of a young girl and she asks who it is. And he says, oh, that's our daughter, Mary Jane. She lives in Glasgow. She's a school teacher. So then they're talking and we see John running through the fields trying to get home. He sits down and he starts talking to her in a very inappropriate way. He's telling her, oh, John got really drunk at the bar, but he was having a great time and he was making friends with people. And a lot of the ladies like him. Especially Katrina. Fiona's getting really upset. And then he tells her, you may want to spice things up in the bedroom a little bit. Maybe get some sexy lingerie. Make it more interesting for John. So she says, "This is highly inappropriate. You have no right to talk to me like this. Please get John. I need to go home." He says, "Well, John is taking a shower right now." She goes, "Well, get him, please." John calls Tommy. "Good, you're here." Tommy says, "Take off your clothes. I told her you're in the shower." So he gives him a towel to wear, and he throws a glass of water on him, right on his face. John comes in the room, and Fiona's staring at him, and he's like, "Oh, that was a great shower," and blah, blah, blah. And she doesn't believe a word of it. So she runs out. John is following her, and then Tommy comes out to speak to him. He says, "I smoothed it over with her. Don't worry. Things will be okay." John opens the door, and they have this cute black cat. His name is Harlequin. And he runs out. And John's like, "Hey, where you going?" The cat's not supposed to go out, I guess. John closes the door. Fiona's furious. She confronts him and says, "Who is Katrina?" "Katrina's the one who works at the food march." "Well, Tommy told me that you were hanging out with her." And John is saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. I just got drunk at the pub. I was hanging out." And she's yelling at him. And he said, "You want me to have a good time. You want me to make friends. And now you're giving me a hard time because of it." They have a big argument. Then we see Tommy sitting outside, and Harlequin comes over to him, and he picks the cat up, and he starts choking this poor cat. It was horrible. And he's enjoying it. He was in ecstasy. Look at his face. It was horrible. I was like, "No, don't kill the cat. No, no, no." Luckily, Rebecca comes out, and she's like, "Tommy, what are you doing?" And then he lets the cat go. Thankfully, he didn't kill the cat. Later on, he comes in, and she's getting ready for her sermon. And he sits down, and she says, "Are you okay?" And he says, "Well, there's something that we need to talk about." She says, "Oh, that's what I was afraid of. When I'm done here, we'll talk." So we kind of get the feeling that Rebecca may be onto him. She may know what he's doing, and she may be covering for him. We'll find out about that next week. So thank you guys, and I hope to see you in the next video soon. Take care.